Welcome to California in Focus. I'm your host, Keegan Kernodle, and today we're talking about California's gas prices. A new analysis has found that California's gasoline prices could rise to $8.44 per gallon by the end of 2026. Joining me with more on this story is our California reporter, Kenneth Schrupp. Kenneth, why is this that gas will be rising that high by the end of 2026?
This analysis was based on two big changes. Number one, California is losing a fifth of its refining capacity by the end of 2026. We have one big refinery next to Los Angeles that's closing down by October of this year. And then we have another one that's closing by April of next year. And there's going to be a lot of supply disruption because California is an energy island. So whatever it's not going to be able to refine here in California, it's going to have to import from abroad. And we don't really know where that's going to come from. The Gulf Coast of America does have spare refining capacity. However, there's something called the Jones Act, which requires that goods between U.S. ports have to be shipped on ships that are made in the U.S. and crewed by Americans. And there are very few Jones Act vessels. I believe there are 45 compliant Jones Act vessels that could ship this cargo. Unfortunately, those are mostly engaged in set supply routes where the ships are commissioned specifically for a route. So it's not like you can just start moving them from routes. They are needed for something. For example, shipping fuel to Hawaii, which is an island in the middle of the Pacific. So everything must be imported in. Somehow California has more expensive gas than Hawaii, which brings us to the second part. Why is gas in California more expensive than Hawaii if we actually can produce our own oil? Well, it's something, we have a lot of fees. One of those is called the low carbon fuel standard, by which if you're the producer of a quote unquote dirty fuel, you have to buy credits against a standard from people who produce a clean fuel that produces less carbon emissions than the standard. So a gasoline producer, for example, would have to buy credits from the owner of an EV charger network. This is expected to increase the cost of fuel by over $160 billion by the 2040s. A lot of this is going to go towards credits for the owners of EV charger networks. The owners of EV charger networks will get over $100 billion. Hydrogen networks will get, I believe, another $10 billion or so. And what all of this means is just higher prices for consumers. The same USC professor who did this analysis, which is estimating that gas will rise to $8.44 a gallon by the end of 2026. He looked at earlier research and found that the low carbon fuel standards update, which strengthened that rising standard, that it was passed by the California Air Resources Board last year. That was supposed to increase gas prices by the very most at about up to $1.15 a gallon. A lot of estimates. There was a wide range of estimates. The California Air Resources Board itself said it was, I think, a 50-something cent increase, 50-something cent increase. University of Pennsylvania's Energy Center had a much higher estimate. I think it was over $1. The professor from USC himself pegged it more in the 60-cent range. But still, that's a substantial one-year increase just from one fee imposed by a board that is appointed by the governor, or at least all but two of whose voting members are appointed by the governor. Is that a tax? Is that a fee? We might see a future ruling on that if people decide to challenge this again, because this is a substantial cost of living increase for Californians whose cost of living is expected to continue to keep rising as the state limits the supply of pretty much every good and service.
Yeah, I see. Now, is there any proposed like solutions to this? Are they looking to try and keep gas prices down? And I know the answer to this might be pure speculation, but is that maybe part of their push towards EV vehicles?
Right. Well, the California Energy Commission has this handy little chart that shows you where there is a point at which electricity gets so expensive that it is actually cheaper to drive a car on gas than it is to fill up an EV with electrons. Gas prices, the only energy prices in California have doubled in the last decade. So we are quickly approaching the break-even point at which energy will get so expensive that you actually will not save money by driving your Tesla or whatever disposable crappy electric vehicle you have. Sorry, I love technology, but electric vehicles have proven to have just extremely poor value retention. The technology changes so rapidly that the car that you bought a few years ago is pretty much now worthless. People don't buy these cars anymore. EV market share in California, which has the most generous subsidies available, is lavishing billions of state funding on a charging network. EV market share still went down from about 23% at peak to I think about 20.8% now. So no, EVs are not the solution to the cost of driving. Also, EV drivers are probably about to get hit in California by a mileage tax because a gas tax is essentially a user tax on your vehicle based on how heavy it is and how far you travel. So it's actually a pretty good estimate for road wear. So you're paying for your road wear when you buy gas. If you have a little light sedan, you get high MPG, so you don't pay a lot for road wear because you're not inducing a lot of road wear. EVs, completely different. EVs are much heavier, very torquey engines. They do a lot more damage to the asphalt because they're heavier than their gas-powered counterparts. So they're about to be hit, most likely going to be hit by a mileage tax. That's currently what California has been piloting. So your EV is not going to be cheaper to drive than a gas car, even in California, for much longer. Even if gas gets a lot more expensive, though, that could change the calculus. However, if you were to actually look at gas prices, energy prices to any other state, the economics totally change. Even in somewhere like Texas, where gasoline is extremely cheap, energy is also very cheap. So it actually, in Texas, it really is and probably will continue to be much cheaper to drive your EV than fill up your gas car. But in California, the economics of energy are just so screwed up that we don't know what's really going to happen. Because think of all these wildfire liabilities, and the cost of even upgrading the transmissions and power lines to handle all of this renewable energy, quote unquote renewable energy, because those solar panels have to be disposed of somewhere. They can't be recycled; they get thrown away. Windmills, what happens to the old blades? They all get thrown away. It all goes in the landfill. It's not very renewable because it's not recyclable. So these energy prices in California are going to continue to rise, especially with the 100% renewable mandates that we have. And we're going to have to pay a lot more for baseline power. We're getting rid of our hydroelectric plants that provided a lot of stable and clean energy. So California's energy markets are going to be in tumult for some time.
Now, the last thing that I wanted to touch on is what people are saying about this. You wrote a little bit about the California Republicans pushing back. Can you get into that a little bit too?
Yeah, California Republicans have pushed back. They've asked him to reverse his own regulations. There's actually no reason why gas in California has to be expensive. We have simply decided that we're going to legislate refineries out of existence by putting a ban on gas cars in 2035. That looks like Congress is about to overturn it because the House of Representatives passed a measure that would overturn the Biden administration EPA's decision to grant a waiver to California to adopt this gas car ban. But let's get back to actually what's happening in California. Last year, Governor Newsom called a special session of the legislature to pass new refinery regulations. Pretty much he's putting a profit cap on refineries and then a minimum storage requirement. Minimum storage requirement is a big problem because fuel goes bad and it's really expensive to build fuel storage tanks and then maintain them and keep them full. So if you have to store the idea is to store a lot of fuel so you can even out supply when there's a shutdown or a disruption. By the way, the laws also let the state now say when it's okay for plants to shut down and do maintenance. The issue we have with these plants, though, is they're running at 100% capacity at all times because we don't have many refineries. I think we have about 11 refineries and 2 are shutting down. I might be off by one or two on that, but we have demand for oil and gas is going down much slower than our refining capacity is as we significantly increase the number of regulations related to refineries. And so the California Senate Minority Leader Brian Jones has asked Newsom to just not implement his and reverse his own regulations. Again, Newsom called a special session to pass them, and Newsom is now trying to maybe pass the buck on this. He sent a letter to the California Energy Commission asking them to work with refiners to make sure that they can stay in business. One interesting thing that the California Energy Commission has done is issue a study suggesting that the state buying and purchasing the refinery network could be the solution to losing refineries. After you're seeing the high-speed rail debacle, after looking at pretty much any program in California, homelessness, schools, I'm not sure how good a job the state would do at running very expensive, very finicky, decades-old refinery equipment that should be replaced but can no longer be replaced because there's no business case for investing in a business where your primary consumer will start to be outlawed in 2035.
Well, thank you, Kenneth, for breaking this down, getting into it with us. Readers can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com. And thank you for joining California in Focus.